And that impulse to do her duty carried her right through into her 10th decade to the very moment in Balmoral, as my right honourable friend has said, only 3 days ago.
She was our longest-serving monarch. She was respected around the world. She united our nation in times of trouble. She joined in our celebrations with joy and a mischievous smile. She gave an example to us all of faith, of service, of duty, of dignity, of decency.
On behalf of the Welsh Government and people in all parts of Wales, I offer our deepest condolences to all Her Majesty's children and their families on this sad occasion. She will be sorely missed by the many organisations in Wales she championed and supported over so many decades as patron or as president.
Like everyone across Scotland, the United Kingdom, indeed the world, I feel a deep sense of sadness on the death of Her Majesty the Queen. On behalf of the people of Scotland, I offer my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the King, the Queen Consort, and to the entire royal family. There will be many opportunities in the coming days to reflect fully on the Queen's extraordinary life and service. For more than 70 years, Queen Elizabeth has been the great constant in our national life. She has inspired us, on occasion comforted us, and always personified values we hold dear. Throughout her reign, she performed her duties with exceptional wisdom, dedication and fidelity. Scotland loved, respected and admired her.
Very, very sad to break up now, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah, she's a special lady, very special. And obviously, the only monarch we've ever known.
You know, I don't know how she'd ever be. Well, she won't be, you know, replaced.
She was a really very extraordinary woman.
I think she's been there all of our lives, and it's just, you kind of always think that she's going to be there, and then suddenly she's not, and you don't really know how to react.
She used to invite our students to come to Westminster Abbey every year.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for me to believe she doesn't exist. It's impossible.
She meant everything. She was part of our family, she was part of our lives, everything that we were represented for.
The stability of our country needs to be carried on through the King, because our Queen was our rock, our head of our family. And I feel so sad and upset today.
She's the symbol of worldwide. She's a symbol of what this means. That makes a big difference.
She's been around all my life, so I've never known anything different. So, you know, it's going to be a big shock, you know.
I think she'll be remembered as one of the most extraordinary leaders in a time of tremendous change.
I sobbed yesterday when I heard the news and didn't sleep very well. I just feel so sorry for the royal family and the country. She did so much for our country.
It's so special. Just wanted to do something to show my appreciation for what she did for us.
It's personal. She's been with us all my life, even. You know, I'm not getting any younger, but yeah, she's been with us all that time, 70-odd years. You know, a wonderful lady, beautiful lady.
But perhaps one of the most awaited tributes came later on in the evening, when the Queen's eldest son, our new king, gave his first address to the nation.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration, an example to me and to all my family. And we owe her the most heartfelt debt any family could owe to their mother, for her love, affection, guidance, understanding, and example. Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. Alongside the personal grief that all my family are feeling, we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries where the Queen was head of state, in the Commonwealth and across the world, a deep sense of gratitude for the more than 70 years in which my mother, as Queen, served the people of so many nations. In 1947, on her 21st birthday, she pledged in a broadcast from Cape Town to the Commonwealth to devote her life, whether it be short or long, to the service of her peoples. That was more than a promise. It was a profound personal commitment which defined her whole life. She made sacrifices for duty. Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered through times of change and progress, through times of joy and celebration, and through times of sadness and loss. In her life of service, we saw that abiding love of tradition, together with that fearless embrace of progress, which makes us great as nations. The affection, admiration, and respect she inspired became the hallmark of her reign. And as every member of my family can testify, she combined these qualities with warmth, humor, and an unerring ability always to see the best in people. I pay tribute to my mother's memory, and I honor her life of service. I know that her death brings great sadness to so many of you, and I share that sense of loss beyond measure with you all. When the Queen came to the throne, Britain and the world were still coping with the privations and aftermath of the Second World War, and still living by the conventions of earlier times. In the course of the last 70 years, we have seen our society become one of many cultures and many faiths. The institutions of the state have changed in turn. But through all changes and challenges, our nation and the wider family of realms, of whose talents, traditions, and achievements I am so inexpressibly proud, have prospered and flourished. Our values have remained, and must remain, constant. The role and the duties of monarchy also remain, as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England, the church in which my own faith is so deeply rooted. In that faith and the values it inspires, I have been brought up to cherish a sense of duty to others and to hold in the greatest respect the precious traditions, freedoms, and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary government. As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavor to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. but I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others. This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my Queen Consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. In a little over a week's time, we will come together as a nation, as a Commonwealth, and indeed a global community, to lay my beloved mother to rest. In our sorrow, let us remember and draw strength from the light of her example. On behalf of all my family, I can only offer the most sincere and heartfelt thanks for your condolences and support. They mean more to me than I can ever possibly express. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
And for her beloved family, her passing seems to have helped unite them once again. With the Fab Four, Prince William, Kate Middleton, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle reuniting for the first time in years as they were seen paying their respects outside Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, other close members of her family were seen outside Balmoral, speaking to the crowds and reading messages they had left. It was fitting that Her Majesty should spend her final hours at the 72,000-acre Balmoral estate that held a special place in her heart from childhood into old age. She was the first reigning monarch to die in Scotland since James V in 1542.
I felt myself gulp when I saw the hearse with the coffin. Until now, it's all been a rather abstract concept, the death of the Queen. Now it is a corporeal feeling. There she is in the coffin. There she is on her last journey, as the King put it, towards meeting the King's dear papa, who died, just a year ago.
And of course, still draped in the Royal Standard as well.
Yes. About the crowds, I know these gates quite well at Balmoral. I've spent time in the area. I know that the people there do have an absolutely unique relationship with the royal family. They are so used to seeing the royals informally, trudging around the place, having their picnics, driving their Range Rovers, popping into shop. The relationship these people have is just not like any other part of the British public. And even the numbers there today is kind of understated. There's a kind of dour austerity even about their representation at the gates, because this is part of what they do and how they live. And they'll be welcoming His Majesty the King in due course. It's very, very special.
One sees the coffin of Her Majesty the Queen coming through the gates of Balmoral. It was certainly a moment of realisation that this really is happening.
Also, it's the beginning of a journey which the King described as may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. This is a beginning of a profoundly religious event as well that will end with her being buried at St George's Chapel at Windsor alongside her late husband. I know for a fact that you are shortly yourself going to church. It is Sunday, and many folk will be doing that later on. Many may have already done it. Your sense as a woman of faith of the importance to the late Queen of faith, Arlene?
Well, to me, she was the great Christian example. She was never showy about her faith. It meant so much to her. But she did it in a quiet way and in a very dedicated way. And you've seen that in many of her Christmas broadcasts. She very personally referred to her Christian faith and the fact that it informed the way in which she led her life. And I think she's been a wonderful example of Christian faith. For those of us who are Christians, it has been an inspiration, actually, and I wanted to be in church today, and I will be there at 11 o'clock this morning, and it is to obviously pray for our new King, but to give thanks for the life of Her Majesty the Queen, the service she has given to us as a nation. And I think the coffin is coming now because I see people taking their hats off and what have you, but it certainly is for me something very important, and I think today the very fact that this all started with 6 of her gamekeepers carrying her coffin shows how she was full of humility. She would have wanted that to be the case, and she now moves towards Edinburgh and then to London for the state and the pomp and the ceremony.
These people here in Balmoral are also not only friends and supporters, but they work for the family. We know that the coffin was carried to that hearse by the 4 men who did exactly the same for the late Queen Mother, who are people who work on that magnificent estate. The royal family employs an awful lot of people. It shops in that community. In that curious sense, it is a royal family, but it's also a family.
Mm. Yes, and we're looking at a picture there on the screen of the village of Balmoral, which is the nearest village to the Balmoral estate. And it was in that village where so many people knew the royal family because they were regular visitors. We've heard over the last few days villagers talk about how for many, many years gone by, even going back to when the Queen was a girl, would arrive at Balmoral railway station during their summer holidays at Balmoral. The station isn't there anymore, but the buildings are still there. It isn't a railway station anymore. And would often be seen in and around the village and going in the post office and the sweet shop and elsewhere. And quite symbolic that the cortege will I think, very shortly pass through the village of Balmoral. And many people, I think, in the village I had one person from the village speaking this morning saying we just regarded the Queen as a neighbour.
Yes.
Because we saw her and her children and her grandchildren have been part of village life for so very, very long. We didn't really treat her any differently to how we would an ordinary neighbour.
Michael, that's another moving image. Those faces, that stillness, that calm, that love, that respect, writ large across all of those faces, young and old, male and female.
Yes, it's a very dignified scene indeed. Everyone is behaving with great dignity because they are all genuinely very sad and they're very struck by the importance of this moment. And if they've gone there today, it is because they wanted to pay tribute to Her late Majesty.
It's been such an incredibly sad week knowing the Queen has passed. But, you know, she's been such a good Queen to us all. You know, she's been loyal, she's been dignified, she's been kind and compassionate. Everything you'd want from a monarch.
We love the royal family here in Scotland, and we just feel, we feel their sorrow and their loss. And yet the world moves on. King Charles now will be crowned after the funeral, there'll be a coronation, and we look forward to him being our new king. So there's a sense of loss and passing, but also there's a sense of celebration in the Queen's life. She was such a remarkable woman, and what she's done and how she's represented our nation has been remarkable, and we love her for that.
And even now, 40 years on, that oath of allegiance still stands.
Yes, definitely.
And it was an absolute pleasure to serve Her Majesty. You know, she was our boss, and we hold a lot of pride in that.
The crowds are building here at Edinburgh. There is an expectant atmosphere here. People at the moment just looking at some of the floral tributes that have been laid around the outside of the palace. These crowds have been building steadily throughout the morning. There are flowers laid out, cuddly toys, little messages for the Queen, pictures, lots and lots of floral tributes. Just see someone with a balloon there. Earlier we saw a little boy, 14-month-old boy. His name was Knox. He was laying a flower. He was dressed in his, and these are his mum's words, in his Sunday best, came to lay a little flower as well, pay his respects to the Queen. It was a really touching moment, actually. But here they've been rehearsing for the arrival of the coffin later. The police have cordoned off a lot of the streets here. There's a big security operation in place, and when the hearse arrives, we think at around about 4 o'clock, after it's wound its way through the villages of Deeside, also Aberdeen, Perth, and makes its way here, the coffin will be laid to rest in the throne room. Now that contains 2 thrones that were commissioned by King George V in 1911. It's overlooked by a big picture of Charles II, who commissioned the private apartments here at the official residency of the British monarchy here in Scotland. So it's a really, really prominent place for her to rest. And then at 2:35 tomorrow, she'll be taken to St Giles Cathedral at the other end of the Royal Mile, just up the road. There'll be a short service there, a vigil attended by the royal family, the Vigil of the Princes it's called, and then after that the public will be allowed to file in and pay their respects over the next 23 hours that she rests there before she is then flown to Scotland, flown to London, I should say, accompanied by Princess Anne. Making that journey, the journey that Prince Charles referred to in his speech on Friday, the last great journey. This is the beginning of that. It was a very emotional moment earlier when she left Balmoral Castle. Of course, Scotland, a country that the royal family, and particularly the Queen, has such a deep tie to. She's a descendant of Robert II. Every morning at 9 a.m, 15 minutes of bagpipes played by the sovereign piper, a different tune every day. She was connected to the country, to its culture, to the people here. Indeed, when she opened Parliament, and we didn't know it would be the last time she opened the Scottish Parliament just across the road here, the words she used were, "It is often said that it is the people that make a place, and there are fewer places where this is truer than Scotland."
Well, she means a lot to all the people here, and she's done so much for everyone, so we kind of need to honour her, and it's quite a big responsibility, and to be so old and keep doing what she's doing, it's so good.
We think that it's important to come down and lay flowers, because Queen Elizabeth is dead, and she was very important to us.
She was an amazing queen, and it's upsetting that she's not here anymore.
Because we was going to put the flowers down.
And who were the flowers for?
The Queen.
And what did you think of the Queen?
Sad.
She did so much in her lifetime that there's probably a generation that some things that we will never experience, the things that she's went through. And her words of wisdom during COVID, it was also comforting.
Yeah.
It's the end of the world I was born into.
Wow, okay. Just expand on that a little bit for us.
Life was completely different then. It's now gone.
But has it gone or has it evolved?
Well, it has evolved, but as people's views and attitudes, they're completely different. So I'm an extinct creature.
No, not.
As you can see, the emotion. Beautiful country, but Britain at its best. I think that's what the Queen is.
It's a real historical moment. And we knew the Queen was, she's quite old, she was ill, and we knew that, or most of us didn't want to imagine that this was going to happen. Of course. But now we're going through all the pomp and ceremony, and I think that's really important.
And I think, in a way, again, a happy coincidence to a very unhappy situation with the Queen passing in Balmoral does mean now that this motorcade, this cortege, can travel through Scotland, which gives even more members of the public the opportunity to pay their final respect.
Well, of course, and it's again another sort of, she's a unifying force, isn't she? And so with all the whole talk about independence and all that kind of thing, we can park that to one side and just unite as one united kingdom. And I know that obviously she would have wanted that. She wanted us to remain as a union by the things that she was saying. It sounded like she thought that was a good thing. And her love of Scotland. I mean, Scotland is an absolutely beautiful place. It's a sort of final goodbye, isn't it, to the Queen? But then she's going to be reunited with Philip.
Yeah.
So, in a way, she has done what she came here to do, which was reign supremely and leave a fabulous example for those who come after her. And her other job really was the lineage of the royal family is secure, and she did that by reigning for 70 years.
So the power of the sovereign, the power of the monarchy extends across the realms. And I think in a way it's also very touching that Her Majesty did die in Scotland, because it's almost as if her journey down to London is a journey through the country. She's actually having her last tour by coming home to London. And I think that's rather wonderful. And she said often that Balmoral was the place she felt most at rest. I know one friend of mine who said that he thought that Her Majesty was holding on for the Platinum Jubilee, but she really wanted to get to that marker. Now, I don't think she was waiting for Liz Truss necessarily.
Well, no.
But it was amazing that that happened to be the 15th as well, right? It wasn't just the 30th. 15th's a nice quite a round number almost, isn't it? I have 15 Prime Ministers too. Now, of course, we don't know how these things work, but I think that was a nice finish.
Remember, something very extraordinary has happened. A sovereign has died in Scotland for the first time since the 1540s. What we've got to remember is that the line to the British Crown is essentially the Stuart line. And in a fundamental sense, the Crown of Scotland has come back home. There has to be a little sneaking suspicion. Did the Queen wish it? If it had to be anywhere, I would suspect Balmoral, that we know she's devoted to. One of the few remarks that we know has ever been leaked to a Prime Minister is the purring at the result of the Scottish referendum. And I think her sense of belonging there, her mother, of course, Scottish,
yes,
renewing and redoubling the connection, the Balmoral itself, a creation of the renewed union between England and Scotland in the 19th century with the affection of Victoria, and particularly Prince Albert. Albert saw Scotland and the pine trees and the great valleys and the rivers as being like his own Rhineland principality. It's so difficult to say, but at that moment when the Queen, in those last 2 days of her reign, received the new Prime Minister, we saw the two paintings, the two Landseer paintings, Albert on one side, Victoria on her pony on the other. It's that world again of the Victorian engagement of Scotland, and she vindicated that, if you like.
To mark her final evening in Scotland, a Prince's Vigil was held at the city's historic St Giles Cathedral as the Queen's coffin lay at rest.
The four children of the late Queen have now entered the cathedral, standing at the entrance to that cathedral as they prepare to go and stand by the Queen's coffin and stand vigil for, we're told, about 20 minutes. Prince Charles leading the four of them, followed by Anne, followed by Edward, followed by Andrew. And this is a very solemn, silent moment, and we'll wait until they take up their positions. Again, what an extraordinary day this has been, another extraordinary day this has been. And they're now taking their positions around the coffin, or the catafalque, which of course is the raised structure that it's actually on. Now there is some precedent for this. The four grandsons of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in 2002, they stood vigil in Westminster Hall, and going back to 1936, when King George V died, his four sons stood vigil then. So there is some precedent, although I think what's different perhaps about this one is that the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, will take part in this, and this will be the first time that a woman in a royal function has performed that role. The King there he is, absolutely barely moving, looking down at the ground, but literally barely moving, and it is really, really powerful stuff. I have to say, anyone watching this has to be filled with admiration on a human level. How do these people manage to hold their composure in a public situation the way that they do? I remember thinking that back at the time of the Diana funeral, as they all marched through the streets of London, including those boys. They really do have something about them. I must say, a very, very powerful sight.
And so began the Queen's final journey to Buckingham Palace. First by air to RAF Northolt, where her coffin was met by the bearer party and Guard of Honour, formed by Her Majesty's Colour Squadron.
The plane has landed at RAF Northolt. To date, this has been pretty much a Scottish affair. The Queen's body, this is the first time it's touched down in England since her death. And what will now happen as this plane comes to a standstill is there'll be a bearer party from the RAF. They will carry the coffin from the aircraft to the waiting state hearse. There'll be a Guard of Honour performed once again by the Royal Air Force, and they'll give a royal salute as the hearse departs. And I think this moment of the Queen's body coming back to Buckingham Palace it's going to be, down at the palace, I think, a very, very sombre moment indeed. Let's cross to Buckingham Palace now and join GB News' royal reporter Cameron Walker and our Home Affairs editor Mark White.
Well, Nigel, as you can see, Her Majesty the Queen has touched down in that RAF C-17. In the last hour, excuse me, Nigel, the Princess Royal has released a statement, quite a personal statement, saying it has been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journey. She said the Princess Royal said she was fortunate to share the last 24 hours of my dearest mother's life. It has been an honour and a privilege. Witnessing the love and respect shown by so many of these journeys has been both humble and uplifting. We will all share unique memories. I offer my thanks to each and every one who share our sense of loss. So clearly there, the Princess Royal, Her Majesty the Queen's only daughter, accompanying her late mother on her final journey back here to London.
Yeah, no, it is a very powerful statement indeed. And Cameron, the understanding that we had earlier in the day was that King Charles III and the Queen Consort would be there at Buckingham Palace. It's now a very much bigger reception party from the royal family that will meet the Queen's coffin. Is the inclusion of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, will that be seen to be yet another rapprochement, yet another potential healing process within the royal family, especially between the two brothers?
Well, it was a big surprise, Nigel, a couple of days ago when the Prince and Princess of Wales invited the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to join them, greeting the crowds and reading floral tributes outside the gates of Windsor Castle. And perhaps that was a sense that there was some hope of reconciliation. We understand the Prince of Wales believes that he was very keen to have a show of unity between him and his brother, Prince Harry, at this time that their family and indeed the country are grieving the loss of Her Majesty the Queen. I think the fact that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are very much going to be part of this extended family gathering at Buckingham Palace later, again points to the fact that reconciliation is possible. I'm just seeing on my screen, Nigel, that Her Majesty the Queen's coffin has been carried off of the RAF aircraft, the C-17, and soldiers are very carefully, very slowly taking it towards the State hearse, which will allow Her Majesty to travel back to Buckingham Palace, a place she has been so many times and a focal point of the British monarchy for people around the world.
Yes, for the first time since Her Majesty's death, she is now back on English soil. Up until now, of course, she has been solely in Scotland. And Mark White, this is the Royal Air Force performing these duties, yes?
Yes, you can see 8 aviators from the Queen's Colours Squadron of the Royal Air Force bearing that coffin as they prepare to put it onto the State hearse. These are the same 8 aviators who carried that coffin from the capital city of Scotland onto that Globemaster flight for the hour-long journey down here to RAF Northolt. These occasions always very solemn, always very beautiful, and it will be an opportunity now, Nigel, as you said, much of the focus has been on Scotland over recent days, but this will be an opportunity for people here in the capital city to pay their respects.
Yes, and Mark, you know, they've opened up the side, as you say. There are more people getting closer to those palace gates. I know it's been raining for the last hour or two. I don't suppose that's put the crowds off at all. But is it, as I've experienced over the course of the last few days, a large number of people, but is it still very silent?
It is. It's one of the things that does really strike you about being around here. There's not a lot of laughter. There's not a huge amount of conversation. Quiet discussions amongst groups of people really reflecting on what has happened.
The hearse has now begun its journey and is about to begin this 15-mile journey through West London, through the West End of London, to Buckingham Palace, where now a large number of the royal family will meet it, along with the King's Guard.
The final part of the journey took her by road into central London, past crowds of onlookers, before arriving at the palace.
the state hearse now coming down towards Hyde Park Corner.
There is, we can now for the first time clearly see the Queen's coffin in the hearse, and as it goes around Hyde Park Corner, police, soldiers bow their heads, and the crowd stands, much as they had been for the last few days, in stillness and silence under their umbrellas.
We have just seen the first police motorbike outriders appear around the Victoria Memorial here outside Buckingham Palace.
I can just see the state hearse coming into view here. We're going to pause clearly as a mark of respect as the state hearse carrying the body of Queen Elizabeth II pulls down towards Buckingham Palace, and you can listen to the crowds.
There's a much broader round of applause now coming in. Cameron Walker, had you expected this applause to break out like this?
I hadn't, Nigel. You could hear a pin drop just before the hearse came into view, and I think it was pretty spontaneous. And in fact, I certainly wasn't expecting, and I don't think a majority of people here were expecting the state hearse to do a loop around the Victoria Memorial. So the thousands of people who have gathered on the Mall and around the memorial, as many people as possible could get a good view of Her Majesty the Queen's coffin. As I mentioned earlier, the state hearse has been specifically designed so the public can get a good view of Her Majesty the Queen. Before the state hearse took Her Majesty through the central gates here at Buckingham Palace into the forecourt to be taken into via the state entrance to the bow room. But yes, spontaneous applause, Nigel, perhaps appropriate for such a historic occasion.
Ceremonial procession as it leaves Buckingham Palace, and we have the bearer party of the Queen's Company 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, and then the escort party too from the Battalion of the Grenadier Guards, and these the horses and the gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Lord Firebrand, the lead horse, Yogi his nickname, chosen because of his experience in handling these state occasions, because of course we will be hearing the guns of the Royal Horse Artillery and indeed Big Ben as it tolls on the minute as this cortege, this ceremonial procession heads towards Westminster Hall.
And people will be able to watch the procession in person at ceremonial viewing areas along the route.
in there draped with a royal standard and a wreath of flowers, including white roses, spray white roses, white dahlias, and a selection of foliage, including pine from the gardens of Balmoral and lavender and rosemary from the gardens of Windsor, the Queen's favourite homes, one suspects, even though this Buckingham Palace, of course, was her official residence in London. The Princess Royal, the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex immediately behind the coffin. On foot, then Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son, the Duke of Sussex and the Prince of Wales, as he is now, William, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, who of course is the Princess Royal's husband, the Duke of Gloucester, and then the Earl of Snowdon, once David Armstrong-Jones, Queen Margaret's son.
We can see Harry and William there. Brings back some memories from 25 years ago when as boys they walked behind their mother's coffin. They were aged just 15 and 12 back then.
We're now seeing something rather different. We're seeing, dare I say it, a gender distinction. Only the Princess Royal is a woman walking. All the other ladies of the household, of the family, will be in cars behind. And this was a rule established right at the beginning of the 20th century. But then, of course, the beginning of the 20th century, if you look at the equivalent funeral of King Edward VII in 1910, you had 9 kings and the German emperor, but they were all riding on horseback.
As we approach Parliament, one of the most famous attractions in the entire world, which is chiming every minute.
This is the view from the Albert Embankment towards Lambeth as people are gathering there to start queuing for the state funeral on Monday.
Look at that perspective. Look at those great Victorian buildings spelling out the parliamentary and royal grandeur of England, from the Elizabeth Tower to Big Ben. The sheer nobility of that skyline. What a thing to look at whilst you're queuing. You're now, of course, about to turn into the great front of Westminster Hall. This goes right back to the days immediately after the Norman conquest and rebuilt for Richard II as the theatre of monarchy.
And that arch that you can see now, that is the entrance to Westminster Hall.
If I take the wings of the morning and relate in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there the sunshine thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say and venture, the darkness shall cover me, then shall my light be
was 10 pallbearers found from service equerries to the Queen, both serving and former, who carried Her Majesty's coffin to that catafalque in the centre. And as the coffin entered Westminster Hall, the choir of Westminster Abbey, the choir of His Majesty's Chapel sang. It was really quite moving. And then the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said the opening prayer. And you mentioned the fact, Mark, that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the Prince and Princess of Wales were all there, just putting past differences aside and just uniting as one royal family here in London today. The Dean of Westminster also said prayers, including the Lord's Prayer, which the congregation joined in, and the choir sang again. And I think it was really interesting that the royal family remained stoic throughout that service, despite the cameras, despite the sad occasion. They remained very much dignified.
Thousands of people took to the streets of London, waiting hours on end to pay their final respects to the late Queen.
It's about 4 miles now, 4 miles long, but of course, as dawn breaks, it'll probably get longer and longer as people realise this is probably the last chance if they join the queue now.
It's a moment that most of us would never have and never will experience in person. Just such ceremony and such solemnity. It is just remarkable, isn't it? It's something, and the British do it so well.
Everybody who comes out the other end of that hall says it was worth it. It was worth the 8 or 9 or 10 hours waiting overnight in the cold. And they all say it was worth it, and they're so glad they did it.
For 70 glorious years, Queen Elizabeth II reigned. As the French president put it so eloquently, to the Commonwealth, she was your queen. To the rest of the world, she was the queen, ruling for longer than any other British monarch in history. As that final journey ends in the vault of St. George's Chapel, Windsor, we say a heartfelt thank you. On behalf of the people of the United Kingdom and beyond, thank you for being our strength and our heart, and for giving your life and service to us, your people.
On Mark Dolan tonight.